Hey guys, Ashton here, and welcome back to part 2 of our Seiko 6105 dismantling and rebuilding. So this is part 2, so we're going to be putting the watch back together. So the watch has just come out of the cleaner, everything's cleaned as it should be, and we're ready to start assembling. Now I've jeweled the barrel, as you can see there, it's been upgraded. And I've put in our jewel in our barrel bridge and train wheel bridge too. You can see that I've got the original mainspring here. It was in good condition. So when they're in good condition, I like to reuse them. I wind them back into these little mainspring keepers, I guess you could call them, with my mainspring winders, and then it just makes it easier to put it in the watch that way. So before we start putting the thing together, a couple of things we have to do. We have to fix our barrel to make sure our side shake is good, which we've talked about in a previous video, and we have to Epilam our escape wheel, our pallet fork, and our center wheel. Now, why do we have to do this? Well, Epilam is an important procedure, I guess you could call it, that has to be completed when it comes to our escapement. What is Epilam? Epilam is this here, Epilam Episurf Neo. It's a product that basically stops oil creep. That's it. That's it here. How big is this bottle? 50 mils. That's $100 a bottle. So it's not cheap stuff, but it really is important to do because it stops oil creep, and oil creeping is a big problem on escapements, and we don't want oil on the tops of our escape wheel teeth, and we don't want oil on the tops of our pallet stones. So we want to make sure that we're oiling nicely, we're oiling well, and we avoid any lubrication on those areas where it's unwanted. So we have a little jar. It's hard to focus here. Little jar that it's in. We clean it out regularly. So we put and the reason we put it on our center wheel, our seconds wheel, is because we don't want oil creeping up the shaft or the long pivot of the seconds wheel. We want it to stay where it needs to be. So what we do is we put our two wheels in, we close her up, and we let it sit. I like to have it for around 30 seconds. Now, we don't put our pallet fork in because we don't want the horns of our pallet fork to be submerged into Epilam. It can create issues. It can create amplitude problems. We just want the stones to be dipped in. So we want the stones to be slightly dipped in. And I like this when it plays ball and leaves some lubricant. I'll leave some Epilam in there for me. A little more. Why do things never work when you want them to? So here we still have some Epilam in, and we just want to... Really sorry guys, I can't zoom out enough. We just want to let them sit there for a little bit. Now, it's important that we use heat to dry the Epilam, because there's been stories of Epilam turning into like a fine black powder that gets all through the movement. And the prevailing theory on this is that this happens because not drying correctly, not using heat. So we're going to make sure that we put it on the heater before we assemble it in the watch to make sure it's dry. Okay, so that should be long enough for our pallet stones. So we take out our wheels. I've also been told that Epilam has to be kept in the dark. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely what I've been told. So we blow off all our excess. And then we put it in a basket to be put on the heater. Just a couple of minutes, blast it with hot air for a couple of minutes, and we're good to go. Okay, so let's now look at our barrel. Let's close our barrel up. Sans mainspring. We can look and see we have wear on the one side, so closing our barrel up is most likely something that we're going to need to do, because it's something really that we always need to do. Sorry about that noise in the background, that's the heater. We have freedom. It's honestly really quite good. It's really not bad at all, so we might leave that as is. Because the side shake really looks very good. So we're actually going to get away with leaving that as is. Now, we need to lubricate the walls of the barrel. And for this, we use this nasty stuff, Kluber 125. Now, Kluber 125 is a thick, black braking grease for our barrel wall. Now, it's important that it only goes on the barrel wall. We do not want Kluber on the bottom of the barrel. It's a braking grease. It's designed for the mainspring only. It is designed only for the slipping bridle of the mainspring, and we don't want it on the drum. Because all it does is dirty up our mainspring. And what happens when we have a dirty mainspring? Well, we lose amplitude. Now we don't want a huge amount. Would you look at that? I got some in there. Now I'll show you how hard it is to clean off if you do that. This is actually probably the worst oiler to do this with. Okay, so we have our barrel done. Now I'm going to show you why we don't want to get it on there, because it's a bit of a pain to get off. At this point, we'll just turn the heater off. We don't need that on anymore. But we need to get the lubricant out of where we didn't want it. We see how smudgy it is. It's so smudgy. Really quite the pain. We'll then get a little bit of old Rodico. Just to clean it up as best as possible. And we've got it out from where we want it. So we can see it's on the walls of our barrel. Now there was one thing I noticed that I wanted to get rid of, and that was things like that do happen. We have a little burr here. That we need to get rid of. And there we go. Now something that there's a lot of back and forth on whether or not you should lubricate the bottom of a barrel. Now for the Seikos, I kind of tend to like to lubricate the mainspring ever so slightly. So I like to use a bit of 1300 on the barrel. Just here, I found it has pretty good results. Not a lot, just a small amount. Old blues steel springs required lubrication. Modern springs don't, because they say they're factory coated. Now, I think it's good to lubricate these, but I don't think it's as important now with these more modern mainsprings. And this is a modern mainspring. I'd like to, if anyone watchmakers are watching and they have any thoughts on that, I'd be interested in what you have to say about that, because I've had a lot of conversations with people, a lot of back and forth, and there has been a lot of difference of opinion about it, I guess you could say. Yeah. So we now have our mainspring in our barrel. So we'll do again what we just did. We'll put our 1300 on there. On the top. Oh my goodness. What is happening today? Put our 1300 there. It's because I'm not used to doing this on camera. It's gonna take some getting used to. And then we want to lubricate our friction bearing surfaces. Where our barrel arbor goes. Very important to lubricate those bearing surfaces, because that is what spins when the watch is running. That's what moves. That yeah, anyway, it's important to do that, because when it's wound up, that creates friction. Okay, now tops. And then we can put our lid on and close our barrel. Now, every time we do something like that, we need to check our end shake. Barrel end shake needs to be minimal, but there. That's the important part of barrel end shake. So we are good to go. Now what do we do? What comes next? Well, we put our movement in our Seiko movement holder. Again, shout out to Adrian at VTA. I just love these things. I'm so happy he made them. They make life incredibly simple. Now we can get our balance jewels out, and we can lubricate our balance jewels. So what's the order for this, for assembly? Well, I like to do this because it gives us a chance to check. There's our other chaton. It gives us a chance to check the flatness and concentricity of our balance spring. And that is important because we need a flat and concentric balance spring so that we achieve desired optimal timekeeping results. So we'll get the extra fine, beautiful brand new tweezers out. Tweezers are one of those things that I am constantly buying because they don't last forever. I'm pretty hard on my tweezers too, a little bit like I'm hard on my oilers. But I did recently buy this ergonomic oiler, and it is just, oh man, it's unbelievable. Crazy expensive. I think they're $50 an oiler, whereas a regular red oiler like this is about $3. To give you an idea, but man, they are absolutely next level. Okay. Some guys will use an automatic oiler for balance jewels. I'm not an automatic oiler fan. I've got one. I've used them. I don't know. I really don't like them. And because I'm trying to do this on camera, you go and do something like that, where we get our tweezer stuck. So we're gonna have to clean that one in our bench fluid. And blow it dry. Nice and clean. It doesn't need to go back through the cleaner. When it's like that, it's just a small amount. We can just clean that off at the bench. Why don't I like automatic oilers? You might be asking. The answer is I don't really know. Let me put our chaton on our end stone like so. We want to make sure we always have a nice circle of lubricant. We use 90-10 as our lubricant. I don't want to hear anybody commenting that Seiko lubricants are still available, blah, blah, blah. I use Swiss lubricants. And that's what I'm sticking with. I'm not going to get into that online fight again. Yeah, I don't really know why I don't like automatic oilers. They're fine. They do the job. A lot of the guys at Rolex used them when I was there, but I don't know. I never really clicked with them, I guess you could say. So we now pop our springs in. And just on that note, it doesn't really matter what you use. You could oil with the back of a pen if you wanted to. If your oiling's neat, I don't care what you oil with. You can oil with a screwdriver. If your oiling's neat and there's no issue, then the oiling's good. So it really doesn't matter. Now, obviously, the back of a pen wouldn't really work. But hey, if you could get it to, good on you. So if you are looking to do your own watchmaking and you like automatic oilers, well, go for it. And don't let anyone tell you differently. So we've got our top setting in. We can now flip her over and we can put our bottom setting in. The hair in there. Okay. Bottom settings in. Look at that. Beautiful. Now let's push her over. Never run a dry balance. Don't ever put, it's not good to put a balance in where you haven't already put the end stones in. It's not a good idea. It can do damage to the balance. It's just not good. I don't advise it. Okay, so let's check out our concentricity and flatness. Why is it important to have a concentric hairspring? Well, we want a concentric hairspring so that it breathes evenly. If we have the hairspring too far to one side, or balance, should really call it a balance spring, that's what I prefer. If we have it too far to one side, when we go into the vertical positions, we're going to have bad timekeeping. We're going to have timekeeping issues, and that's the reason that we need to have our coils the correct distance from each other. Flatness. Why is flatness important? Flatness is important because we're going to have differences between dial up and dial down. If we have an umbrella-shaped balance spring, we're going to have issues. We're going to have drastically different timekeeping results. So for the best timekeeping, we need to have a concentric and flat balance spring. And we want it beating evenly between our curb pins. These are our curb pins here. We want it beating evenly between these two pins. So that we get the best isochronism and the best timekeeping results. So we can double check our end shakes. There, it's good. It's a little on the larger side, but they usually are with these Seikos. So now what we want to do is we actually want to remove the balance entirely so that we can get on with the fitting of the rest of the watch. Now, I always check end shakes when I changed the barrel jewels. However, I had a good watchmaking friend who was a bit like a mentor to me in Australia. And he said, how do you know you've done something? And I said, well, you know you've done something because you did it. He says, nope, you know you did something because you checked it. And that always rung pretty true with me. So just because I've done it doesn't mean it's done. It needs to be checked. Now, I've already checked it before cleaning, but the difference is there's no old lubricants, there's nothing dried up now after cleaning. So we need to check it again to make sure that everything as it should be. By the way, we can see our train wheels. See those pivot, see those jewel holes? Absolutely perfect. Nothing. So all our pegging out, all our cleaning in the ultrasonic before, our pre-cleaning, before cleaning, really helped us. So let's check our end shake. It also gives us a good chance to check to make sure our barrel is running true, our barrel is free in our plate. By the way, when we screw screws up, we want them to be tight. We don't want them to break. We don't want them to deform or be over tight. But I see so many loose screws in watches, and they need to be tight. They need to make sure that they're on there. Okay, we have end shake. It is my professional opinion that we have too much end shake. So, you see why it's good that we double check this. Now, what kind of freedom do we want? We want that kind of freedom. When it's dry, we want air to be able to move it. How do we look? Our clearances look beautiful, perfectly flat and concentric. So it's a good thing we checked it again, because can you imagine if we had lubricated it? If we had lubricated it, well, that would have been a right pain in the butt, because we would have had to have undone all our hard work by cleaning the whole thing again. Okay, so we can clean off, and we can lower our just a couple of microns. We don't want to go nuts. Just a couple of microns. I'm going to clean it off with a little bit of Rodico. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take it, dip it in some creamy solution, make sure we get any excess oil or anything like that off there. Rodico leaves a film. It's good, it serves a purpose, but okay, we'll let that dry. Now what we can do while we're waiting is we can fit our center wheel. Now let's make sure we find the right center wheel screw, because you remember from dismantling that I said the center wheel screw for the center wheel cock is very similar to the seating lever spring or cover plate screws, as it's known by both those monikers. They aren't screws that have any polishing on them. They're kind of rough finished, I guess you could call them. And that's how we know that those are the right screws for that. But all three screws are the same. But the two screws for the seating lever spring are smaller, and we use the larger screw for the plate. So, check our wheel. Again, we check everything as we go. We make sure that we've got no marks or anything like that. And that's how we do it. So, let's lubricate our top. Man, I can't catch a break today. I've got lubricant on the pinion. Now, in this situation, it has to be cleaned off. We have to make sure that we put it in our bench fluid and clean off the old oils. And we blow it dry. We don't need to go through the stages. We don't need to use the cleaning fluid because it's freshly applied oil. We can just successfully use the rinse and blow it off. Like I said, I'm really still getting used to doing this stuff on camera, so you want to make sure it's nice and dry though. Very important that it's nice and dry because we don't want any cleaning fluid left there that's getting through the watch, that's destroying any nice lubrication work that's been done. And that should be good. So here we want a nice thick lubricant. This is HP 1300 or HP 1000 territory. I prefer 1300 for this particular wheel. I actually don't use HP 1000 very often. In fact, I don't use it. There we go. And then we can screw our screw in place. Grey screwdriver for this one. And we can check our end shake to make sure it's there. This is going to be one of the larger end shakes in the gear train. Now we can check our barrel. We have our freshly cleaned plate. It's a little too tight. I went too much. So again, it's a good thing we didn't lubricate because we went too far. Now this is the joy of watchmaking. You have micrometric readings on our Oriental But sometimes you still don't get it quite right. Now the beauty is that's still clean. We cleaned off our Horia pusher enough, and we don't need to put our plate through the cleaner. So that saves us a bit of time. It was quite oily the first time. And there we go. Our end shake's there, but minimal. Exactly how we want it. Now, obviously, we aren't going to have that freedom. Now, because we've jeweled the barrel, we always want to check our engagement with our center wheel. Make sure everything's nice and straight and clean, and we're good. And when you check engagement, you need to check, obviously, your up and down play as well, because our end shake comes into play. It might look good, but it might not be at its maximum. And remember, the watch runs in the opposite position to this. This is upside down right now. This is the way we work on it and put the gear train in, but this is upside down because this is not the way the watch runs. So we can now lubricate our barrel arbors. Well, really, it's arbor, just one arbor. Now, bottom. As we let that drop into place. And then we can lubricate our top arbor. Again, we want to be using HP 1300 for this purpose. And we check our third wheel and our third wheel does not go in place yet. We put in our balance stop. Helps if we put it in the right way, doesn't it? We then put our third wheel in place. It doesn't really matter which wheel you put in next, but I always like to put the escape wheel in next. And then our last wheel that we put in is our center wheel, and we put a little drop of 9010 on our bearing surface. Very small, very, very minimal. If we put too much on here, we end up with way too much resistance, drag, and amplitude drop. Some watchmakers on some mold watches, this isn't Seiko specific information, will actually not lubricate that wheel, leave it dry. But we lubricate it in this situation. I like to. Okay. We now put our bridge on, and that never happens. I'll tell you that right now. All the wheels, the pivots perfectly fell in. So count your blessings there, because that absolutely never happens. Normally you have to, I like to tap the side of the movement holder. Now when we screw these down, we don't do them all, we make sure we check. And we can check our end shakes. How do you know you did something? Because you checked it. I know a lot of people find that, a lot of people I've told that statement to, they say find it very confusing, but I don't know. To me, it rings really true. And I like it as a saying. And I'm going to keep using it. All right. Now it's time to put our ratchet wheel in place. Now let's look for our ratchet wheel screw. Where are you? There you are. Sorry, this is a click. This is not a ratchet wheel. This is a click. Now we can put our ratchet wheel in. Our ratchet wheel screw. That's going to run our gear train. Tighten that up. We also want to check that the wheels are running true at this point. So we put a bit of power through, check all our wheels and make sure that they're flat and centered. Looking good. Looking good. Now let's pop our pallet fork in. Now I haven't pushed the stones in at this point. Pushing the stones in is something we spoke about earlier. The stones have not been pushed in. The stones are where they were. And I'd like to see what kind of result we get with the stones where they are. Now, it's important to remember, you do not, I repeat, do not time a watch when you put it together. You must let it run in. You absolutely have to let the watch run in. I say 24 hours. I think companies like Patek maybe do it after 48. Okay, so we've wound our mainspring up. Now again, before we run our gear train, we want to lubricate. Sorry about that. We want to lubricate. So on our third wheel, I use HP 1300. On our escape and center, I use 9010. Not too much, not too little. How much do you add? Well, you add just the right amount. I know that's not very helpful. A little trick, I don't take the movement holder out. A bit of 9010 there, and then a bit of HP 1300 on our third wheel. We do not lubricate pallet pivots. Creates drag and gives us problems. So we do not lubricate pallet pivots. We lubricate pallet stones, but not pivots. And lubricating the pallet stone is something I'm going to do now. This isn't going to be easy to do, but what I'll do is I'll lubricate it because I need to use an inspection loop. I'll lubricate it and then we'll go over to the microscope and we'll look at the lubrication once it's done.